All right, we are back here on the Just End the Suffering podcast, wrapping up our coverage of a very wild March Madness tournament. Joining me today, our co-host for the month of March. Now we are signing off for the season here. Troy Mauriello is here. Troy, how are you?
I'm doing well, Mike. I'm a little bit sad. The madness is over now. It's been a really fun 4 or 5 weeks that we got to do this, but unfortunately now we got to wait 11 months now for March Madness to come back. So I'm a little bit melancholy this morning.
Yeah, I mean, even just like getting college basketball itself back, we're waiting until November, which is gonna be a while.
Yeah, it's too long of an off season. Now the good thing is, with the transfer portal, obviously there's guys entering every minute. It feels like so. The off season really never ends, or the season really never ends for college basketball. But yeah, in terms of getting games back, we do have to wait about 7 or 8 months now. So that's gonna be a long off season for sure.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of stuff going on now. I mean, this is sort of like coming a mini NBA, like where you have the transfer portal, guys when they want to declare for the draft, the recruits who haven't committed yet. I mean, there's some intrigue, but nowhere near enough to keep you engaged like the NBA free agency stuff does.
No, yeah, it's definitely not on that level, but you're right. It is getting to that level. It does kind of feel like, in a way, free agency, and in a way, it's kind of cooler. I guess if you're a fan of one of the teams like myself, a little bit more nerve wracking when you don't know who's gonna become, a quote unquote free agent. You don't know that who's gonna enter the transfer portal, who's gonna go to the draft. It certainly is fun, but yeah, it's not on the NBA level, but it is getting there, I would say.
It is getting there. Let's talk a little about what we saw this weekend. We'll get to the championship game in May, which took a wild swing, couple of points here. But we'll start off with probably the headline of the week is the Duke-UNC Final Four game, probably the most epic game of the weekend. And shot making back and forth, so much fun to watch. Your general reaction of that game?
Yeah, I mean, you and I are obviously a little bit on the younger side for people who watch college basketball for sure. But in the 15 or so years that I can fully remember watching college basketball, one of the best games I've ever seen. And maybe that's a little bit of recency bias, but when you take into consideration everything that surrounded this game, of course it's a Final Four game. It's between the two biggest rivals in the sport, if not the two biggest rivals in all of sports. Then you throw in Coach K's final game as well. And I think Jim Nantz, said it perfectly on the broadcast towards the end. How often do you have that much hype going into a game? And then not only does it deliver on the hype, but it exceeds the hype. Like you mentioned, the shot making was phenomenal. We had 17 lead changes. You knew basically from the first 5 or 10 minutes that this game was going to come down to the wire. Two rivals, Coach K's final game, like I mentioned. It was just an epic game. Obviously, Duke's free throw shooting kind of shoots them in the foot there at the end. Love hits that big shot for North Carolina. That's kind of the dagger in that one. Just an absolutely phenomenal game. UNC now has the bragging rights forever. Of course, they would have liked to win the national title, but they will always have that they ended Coach K's career. And not only did that, but did it in the Final Four. So that Duke-UNC game, when you look at this tournament, we said it a couple of weeks ago with St. Peter's, 20 years from now, when we go talk about the 2022 NCAA tournament, of course, we're going to remember St. Peter's and that Cinderella run. But I think one of the main things we're going to remember, if not the main thing, maybe even more so than Kansas winning, is that Duke-UNC classic Final Four game that was Coach K's final game. It's something that we're going to remember for a lifetime.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've mentioned like big games that don't deliver the hype. I'm thinking automatically, as in terms of recent memory, Super Bowl 55 was it with the Buccaneers and the Chiefs? Everybody's, Tom Brady versus Patrick Mahomes would be fantastic, and then the game's a blowout. So back in this game, not only lived up to the moment, you had plenty of lead changes. Nobody was blowing each other out. You had some great theory down the stretch, and this is one where I do feel bad. People say, "Oh, Duke choked." Like, I don't think Duke choked this game. I think these teams both played great, both deserve to win, and you can only have one person win a game. And you want to blame anybody, you can say, okay, maybe Mark Williams missing the two free throws down the stretch. Still takes a ridiculous shot from Caleb Love, like on the other end, to make that matter.
Yeah, exactly. And, I was kind of thinking the same thing with the national title as well, thinking, with 2 minutes to go, oh my goodness, one of these teams is just going to be absolutely devastated, in that Duke-UNC game, because they both played phenomenally, like you mentioned. The free throw shooting, Williams missing the two there, that's going to be the thing that everyone harps on. But no, I wouldn't say that Duke choked. Yeah, like you mentioned, that Love shot was phenomenal. UNC just, I would say, I guess, out executed them in the end. But at the end of the day, this game was a total toss up, as was the national title game. Just a total toss up in the final, 5-10 minutes as to who was going to win. And UNC, of course, comes out with the win in that one, and then comes up short in the national title.
Yeah, before we go on to the national title game, I want to touch on what we can look forward to for Duke next year because obviously Coach K is retired. I don't think he's gonna pull a Tom Brady to unretire and come back in a month. I don't think he's gonna do that. So John Shire is running the program. They have a good class of recruits coming in. They have five impact players coming in. The top five scorers should be off to the NBA. So Jeremy Rick's probably the only guy back. So I think we just need to see what John Shire does. He has a lot of talent coming in. Good job on the recruiting trail, but I'm curious to see what they look like next year.
Yeah, it's kind of odd because, yeah, sure, it's the end of an era. Coach K has been there forever. It's certainly going to be weird, but they're bringing in John Shire, who's kind of been like the de facto head coach for the last couple of years now. So it's not going to be this major change for Duke that we've maybe seen when some other legendary coaches move on in college basketball. And yeah, I mean, Duke's going to be Duke. They're going to be relying on freshmen again, like you mentioned. I'm looking at their recruiting here. They've got 3 of the top 5 players according to 247, and then 4 of the top 13. So they're going to have a loaded recruiting class. They're going to be, I'm sure, a top 5, top 10 team preseason, and I think that their goal again remains to win a national title. I don't think that the expectations necessarily change. Now that Coach K is not on the sidelines for them, I don't think it's going to be a big culture change or anything like that. We're not going to see a rebuild, because Coach K has obviously built up that brand now for the past 20, 30 years, really, as to what Duke is. I don't think that they're going to have a hard time getting recruits or anything like that. I think that the beat is just going to kind of march on for them going forward. So yeah, this loss hurts, and I'm sure it hurts to lose Coach K if you're a Duke fan, but I think that the future still remains very, very bright for them.
I'm curious how this impacts Shire's expectation level down there because if he's taking over after, if say they Duke have won and they win the title and Coach K goes off in the sunset with a win, I wonder if it's easier for him to just take over compared to coming off what might be a lot of fans consider about the biggest disappointment in Duke history, the way they lost these games and they lost Coach K last home game, they lost the UNC in the Final Four and Coach K's career. I wonder if that's more pressure on in year one.
Yeah, and the pressure is always going to be there for sure. It's Duke. You're following up the most legendary coach in really all of college sports, I would say. But yeah, I think that there is a little bit of added pressure now when you look at how this season ended and the disappointment that came with this season. Like you mentioned, if they would have won it all, or maybe if they would have won it all, maybe the expectations for next year are a little bit less with that fan base. Like I said, Duke is a program that expects to win every single season. They expect to win a national title. It's now been 7 years, going to be 8 years next year that they've won one. So, the expectations are there. And I think that just gets added on to the pressure of following up this legendary head coach for John Shire.
Yeah, absolutely. Now let's get to this championship game. And boy, this was wild. I mean, Kansas comes out of the gate. They're red hot. They're up 9-3 early. Then North Carolina goes this huge run. They're up 40-25 at the half. They're up 16 at one point. I'm sure a lot of people on the East Coast went to bed saying, okay, this game's over. And boy, if you tuned out of that game, you missed a wild finish.
Yeah. What a phenomenal game. It almost kind of felt like a little bit of an NBA game to me, right? With the runs back and forth. Where the first half, almost whatever happens in the first half doesn't matter. Like you said, Kansas gets out to this early lead. UNC goes out on a big run before halftime, and then really right out of the gate in the second half, Kansas goes on this big run. Just a complete back and forth game. When you consider obviously what happened with Duke-UNC on Saturday night, maybe it wasn't on the level of that, but still a phenomenal national title game. I would say probably the best national title game that we've seen in 5 or 6 years. We've had some stinkers recently, but yeah, the defensive intensity from Kansas in the second half, I think, won them this game. They held UNC to 29 points in the second half after allowing 40. Caleb Love did not have a good game. Took 24 shots for UNC. Only went 5 of 24. Missed a couple shots at the end there as well. So yeah, I would just say Kansas. They really stepped up on the defensive end. That was what got them this win. But another game that was a total toss-up back and forth. Really could have gone either way.
Yeah, and I was looking last night. I mean, we were texting during the game. At the end of the first half, the play there where North Carolina misses the 3. Kansas boxes out Baycott. They don't box out Puff Johnson. He comes in, gets the easy putback layup, go 40-25. I'm sure a lot of people said, okay, North Carolina is dominating on the glass. They're up 18-2 second chance opportunities. This game is over. But if you watch this tournament, you remember what Kansas did to Miami when they were playing very badly the first half, not losing by as much, but they played terribly. And then they came out and just said, game and went to another level. And that's sort of what happened here. I think that's sort of something I feel like if you pay attention to this tournament, you say, okay, this might not be over yet. Let's see what happens the first 5 minutes out of the break. And if Kansas is flat in the game, getting over then.
Yeah, and if you're going to win a national title, if you're going to win 6 games in this tournament, 6 in a row, you need to have that kind of in you. You need to have that where, you play a crappy first half, you don't play great. You're down 15 in this, like you mentioned, the Miami game, they didn't play great as well in the first half. You need to have a couple of games where you just flip a switch in the second half. Not everyone can do that, but a championship level team can. If you're going to win a national title, you have to do that. And Kansas was able to do that in the second half of this one. And honestly, UNC, turning back to UNC for a second, I feel like the entire tournament we were kind of waiting, maybe not expecting, but maybe waiting to see, would the UNC of the regular season come out? Would the UNC in January and February kind of come out, and that would be their downfall? And it really never did until the second half of this game, where UNC looked like that team that was really a bubble team all season long, that was an 8 seed all season long. It finally happened for them in the second half, where they just kind of looked a little bit overmatched. That was really the only time, I would say, in this tournament where they really looked like they were overmatched by their opponent. Obviously, the Baylor run was one thing, but that was more just, I think, Baylor making a furious run. They did look a little bit overmatched in the second half. The other shoe kind of fell finally for North Carolina, where they looked like that team that was a bubble team all season long. That was my take on that.
Yeah, my observation with that was honestly, it's like they got so far away from what they did success in the first half. They were just attacking the paint. Baycott
Mhm.
had double by halftime, and they were just crushing on the glass, crushing second chances. And then all of a sudden, they're chucking up threes. You have 4 people outside the perimeter and Baycott down low. And like they were way too slow to get back to what they were doing. By the time that happened, the game's basically tied and you're in a dogfight.
And even to that point, I mean, look at their second to last possession. You don't need a three there. There was plenty of time left to take a two, to foul, to hope the Kansas maybe misses a free throw or two, or misses the front end of a free throw, and you're down by 1 at that point. Instead, what do? They shoot a three, they get a rebound, they shoot another three. They didn't really seem like that was the smart thing there. They had a timeout as well. They didn't use it. I believe Manic got a rebound. He could have put it right back up for 2, kicked it back out instead. Yeah, it feels like they were too reliant on the 3 ball, especially on that second to last possession. I did not like what they did there. I would have taken a quick 2. You hear the announcers always say you don't need a 3 here. I didn't think that they needed a 3 there to try to tie the game. They could have taken the 2 and then let the game play out, try to extend the game. Now Kansas did their best to give it back to them, but still, I didn't love that second to last possession by North Carolina.
Yeah, I think one thing that's important to mention here about that end game sequence is that like right before I think they were down 1, they had the ball there. Armando Bacot ends up like hurting his ankle again. You saw the V replay that like basically the floorboard, one of the floor panels came loose and it bent on his ankle. He comes out of the game there, and then you wonder maybe that not having Bacot down low and having Manic be the 5, maybe they said, we can't go low. We have to shoot outside. And instead of trying to just attack the rim and either get to the stripe or get a quick layup.
And yeah, that was a really unfortunate thing. I guess that's kind of one of the downfalls of playing a game in a football stadium. Playing a basketball game in a football stadium. Obviously, they're always going to do that, but yeah, I don't think that happens. If we're in a basketball arena with Baycott, but what a gutsy effort for him. He only shot 3 of 13 from the field. But 15 points, 15 rebounds, like you mentioned. I think he was the first player ever to have 6 straight double doubles in the NCAA tournament. He does it on the bad ankle as well, and then he re-injures it at the end there. Yeah, really gutsy performance by Baycott. But yeah, you have to wonder, did that injury kind of sway what UNC did on that possession? Yeah, it's certainly a good point.
Yeah, I also think they're a little bit of a victim of the moment too, because throughout this tournament, we've seen Caleb Love hit big shot to big shot. He hit the big shots against Baylor, he hit a big shot against UCLA, hit the big shot to Barry Duke. So the mother must have figured, like we'll give it to Caleb Love, he'll make something happen. You said 24 shots, he only makes 4. That's maybe one of those things you realize that's not your night.
Yeah, exactly. And even with that, even going 4 of 24, when he released it, I was like, this is going to go in probably, just because it's what we've seen throughout the tournament from him. He's hit big, like you mentioned, big shot after big shot. Obviously it's easy to play kind of, Monday morning quarterback there and say, oh, that was a terrible shot. But, in the moment, maybe I wasn't as upset with that because he's hit so many of them. But yeah, if you're Caleb Love, maybe it would have been smarter there to say, you know what, let's try to attack the basket, or let's try to get someone else a good look here because it's just not my night. But yeah, in the moment, I can't say I was too upset about that, but looking back, it was probably not the best shot.
Yeah. Also, one thing I don't understand from the fallout of the game here is like, how did Ochai Agbaji end up winning most outstanding player for the Final Four? Because to me, like he was not that great in that game. It's a bunch of free throws. He was not a factor down the stretch here. Dave McCormick, I think, should have won that award.
Yeah, McCormick had that big game against Villanova as well. Yeah, the double-double for him, 15 and 10, 7 of 15 from the field. He had a couple of big shots at the end there. Yeah, I think Abaji, maybe it's, kind of a case where, the quarterback kind of wins Super Bowl MVP a lot of the time. Abaji's their best player, of course, their most notable player. So maybe they just gave it to him. But yeah, if you're looking at the Kansas roster and, who played great for them, he doesn't really stand out. Obviously, they had 5 guys in double figures in this game. Yeah, but I wouldn't say that Abaji really stood out above everyone else in this one, at least.
Yeah, like I also think in terms of like big shots in that game, I can't think of one heat man. I know Remy Martin's 3 in the corner, definitely like when they helped gain the lead was big, and McCormick getting back to back down low with Brady Maddock in the final minute there to give them the lead and put them up 3. And those are the shots. I'm like, that's the most any player to make.
Yeah, and yeah, even Remy Martin, 4 of 6 from 3-point range in this one. I think he had 14 points off the bench. Yeah, 14 points off the bench. He was phenomenal in this one as well. Without him, they certainly don't win. Like you mentioned, hit that big 3 in the corner towards the end. Yeah, it was a total team effort from Kansas. I think you could have given it to really 1 or 3 or 4 guys on their team tonight. Yeah, but Abaji, like I said, I think because he was maybe the most notable guy, he probably gets it in the end.
All right, let's take a look at for these 2 teams going forward here. In terms of North Carolina, obviously they have this incredible run. You feel good about Hubert Davis, the coach, going forward. You wonder now, like, if some of these guys who had these big tournaments, like Armando Bacot, like Caleb Love, go test the NBA waters. Are they going to be without Leaky Black, who's graduating? I think RJ Davis, is graduating as well. But like, what do you think about them going forward here? What they could do next year?
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't really follow the NBA draft too closely, but I don't think that Davis or Love or even Armando Bacot are going to be these crazy high lottery picks. Maybe Love played himself into that consideration, but just in the draft boards that I looked at today, I didn't really see them that high on any of them. Again, maybe they played themselves into that role. They will certainly, I would assume that they're going to test the draft waters, but you could see a scenario where Bacot and Love are back next season, and maybe even Davis as well. But and if that's the case, I think we could be looking at North Carolina, kind of how we looked at UCLA this season. UCLA, that blue blood team, they made that miraculous run to the Final Four last season. They lose on a buzzer beater. They basically bring their entire team back, or at least all the meaningful guys from that team back this year, and they go into the year as kind of a Final Four national title favorite. If North Carolina can get a couple guys of their core to come back next season, they could be kind of looked at as that as well. A team that obviously makes it all the way to a national title game in a season that they went into the tournament as an 8 seed, where they were kind of on the bubble all season long. They could go into next season kind of like UCLA did this season with those national title aspirations. So it's going to be very, very interesting. Like we said, with the transfer portal, I don't think any of those guys will transfer, but with the transfer portal, with the NBA draft, it's really hard to predict, 7 months out what teams are going to look like. But I would say that it's a good chance that UNC is a top 4, top 5 team going into next season.
Yeah, I think the key for them is Baycock. I feel like he was the most unstoppable player for them throughout the tournament. And like, he's one where like you look at it, if he's a 2nd round pick, like how much is he gaining realistically going back to school, especially after a stage like this on the NCAA tournament? I mean, it's not impressive. We saw Drew Timme do this last year when he had the great tournament, lost for Gonzaga, came back for another year. But you wonder, does Baycott think, am I going to get any better? Is it worth me to stay and collect NIL money, or just jump to the pros now and get a contract and start earning more serious money?
Yeah, and that's always the decision these guys have to make right now. And the NIL, making money now off yourself, that obviously clouds the decision even more for these guys. The flip side of that is maybe he's saying, I'm a 2nd round pick. I'm projected a 2nd round pick. Even next year, I'm going to be a 2nd round pick as well. Maybe I'll just come back to school and try to win a national title. But you'd always wonder, how important is it to those guys? Every guy is different, of course, in terms of what they want to do on the collegiate level. Maybe he says, you know what, I got this team to a national title game. I want to go get paid now. I want to go get drafted into the NBA, which he almost certainly will. Yeah, so every guy is different. It's going to be a tough decision. Every decision is different for these guys. So yeah, it's going to be very, very interesting. But if he does come back, I think if UNC returns a couple other guys of their core, I think that they're a national title favorite going into next season.
I think the more interesting ones, obviously, Kansas, who right now is our national champions. They earned that win. They have a lot of guys leaving school right now. Obviously, Randy Martin no longer has eligibility. There's McCormick or Mitch Lightfoot. Or Raji's going pro. Christian Brown is the X factor, I think, in this group. They have a good class going in, but I think the shadow hang over all this thing is this these 5 level one violations being thrown at the program, Bill Self. And you wonder here, like, is this area where maybe Bill Self's not coaching next year? Does this team have postseason ban next year? We saw the chaos going on at LSU right now, where basically nobody who was on last year's roster is actually committed anymore for the new coach, Matt McMahon. Like, all the kids who recruited decommitted, they only have a couple of transfer portal guys in there. Like, you could be looking at some real chaos at Kansas here, if depending on how the NCAA rules this.
Yeah, how crazy would that be, right? If Kansas wins a national title and then, a few months later their coach gets sanctions and maybe like you said has to sit out a year, or they get a postseason ban for next season. The defending national champs aren't eligible to play in the NCAA tournament. How crazy would that be? Yeah, that cloud certainly hangs over for them. I wouldn't say that they're going to be, at this point that they're a national title favorite going into next season, like you mentioned. Abaji's going pro. McCormick is out of eligibility. Remy Martin is out of eligibility. So they're going to lose a lot of guys. They get Christian Brown back, of course, but I would say that they're probably still going to be around the top of the Big 12 for sure. Them and probably Baylor and a couple other teams as usual. But yeah, I wouldn't say that it's national title or bust next season for Kansas. And of course, in the back of your mind, you're wondering, are they even going to be eligible? What's going to go on with that? So certainly going to be a different look in Kansas next season, one way or another. I think that they're very happy, very very thankful that they got this national title at least this season.
Yeah, I'm curious if this, especially like if Self ends up getting banned, the team doesn't. Like, if maybe they have like a rough year, like, you wonder if they're going to try and pull, like, I forget which school it is a few years ago where they're having a bit. I think it was in Auburn a couple of years ago where they had the middle of the season they were doing bad. You know what? We're not going to play the postseason this year. Like,
Self-imposed,
yeah, it's like we're self-imposing it. I think that could be a realistic possibility if they go off to a rough start.
Yeah, yeah, and with Kansas, they're always around the top of the Big 12. But yeah, if you look in January, February, and they're kind of like a middling team, maybe they're ranked somewhere in like the high teens, low 20s. Maybe they say to themselves, you know what, this isn't going to be our year. We're going to be a 4 or 5 seed in the NCAA tournament. Let's do this now. You could definitely see that happening because yeah, we've seen it in the past. There is a precedent for this in the past. So yeah, it wouldn't shock me if they did that or if Bill Self did that for Kansas this season or next season.
Yeah, I'm sure for now, I mean, they're going to try and fight the NCAA for as long as they can because they do have a good recruiting class coming in, headlined by Grady Dick and McDonald's All-American. But like, I think this is one where you have to watch very closely because if Self gets hit where he's missing like half the season, a whole season, and the team struggles, like, and they know that they're probably going to have to deal with the postseason ban at some point, they might say, let's just take the medicine now, not have it ruin a year. We have a bit more serious title aspirations.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know if we've ever had something like this where, a team has won a title and it's immediately going to be like in question as to, whether or not it's going to stick or whether or not they're going to face some, type of a postseason ban or some kind of sanctions right away. Maybe I'm blanking on something, but I don't know if it's ever happened that immediately where like, before they even win, we kind of know that there's something coming in the future. So it's a very, very unique situation for sure.
Yeah, because from what I can gather here, I don't think the title is impacting. I feel like all the stuff is
Yeah.
happening was like back a couple of years ago. Like, might
Mhm.
have like some appearances from about maybe that 18 Final Four gets vacated or something like that. But I don't think that like they're gonna have to like not hang this banner.
Yeah, which is good for them, of course. And the whole vacating titles thing is silly in general. It's silly to say a team didn't win a title. Louisville with Patino, that was a big thing, of course. I never understood that why they vacate titles and Final Fours and all that. If there's one thing that the NCAA can get rid of, it's that.
Yeah, because like you're sitting here telling all of us who watched that 2013 NCAA tournament that Louisville did not win. Like, we didn't like what
Yeah.
we saw was a complete fiction. Come on.
If you want to make them take the banner down, I guess, but don't say it didn't happen. That's always silly to me. It happened. We all watched it. Sure, maybe they cheated a little bit to get there, but it happened. Don't take that away from the school.
If MLB did not take the trophy away from the Astros in 2017, we
Yeah.
shouldn't be like forcing teams to like take away their title runs or Final Fours. That's like, that to me is dumb.
Exactly. The whole, and that was a big debate, obviously, with the MLB, but hopefully we can that can set a precedent. I'm sure it won't with the NCAA because they usually don't operate. How the rest of the leagues go. Yeah, but if there's one precedent that I would like to see set going forward, it would be that.
All right, let's take a quick detour here into One Shining Moment, which I loved here. Anything really stick out for you from this year's edition of One Shining Moment?
Yeah, being a Big East guy, I got my St. John's hat on right now. Being a Big East guy, I didn't see a lot of Big East in this. Villanova made the Final Four, They barely even got featured. We had what 17 or 6 teams in the tournament, and we had like 10 seconds total. If you don't want to include Marquette and Seton Hall, that's fine. They got blown out right away. But like Creighton had a nice run. Excuse me. Providence had a nice run. Villanova made the Final Four. The Big East. It feels like we didn't even exist in this one shining moment. You would have thought ESPN put it together. Honestly, I was really bummed out by the Big East representation. But as a whole, I love the one shining moment. Like we were talking before this. I stay up every year for it. No matter how late it is. I want to watch it that night. I love it. We didn't get it a couple of years ago. I was really really sad, of course. It's phenomenal. It totally emphasizes what this tournament is. That one shining moment. We talked about St. Peter's. That one shining moment for these players and for this coach and for the school. It's one of the best things about the tournament, I would say. So as a whole, of course, I love it. But I was a little upset with the Big East representation.
Yeah, I was one thing I put on Twitter. I was like was Villanova even in the one shining moment video? Because like they made the Final Four and like they're barely there.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I know you want to feature St. Peter's, of course. We knew that it was going to be heavy on St. Peter's, but yeah, you would have thought that St. Peter's made the Final Four and not Villanova. I know that they're there all the time, and it wasn't that big of a deal for them. But come on, give Villanova a little bit more of a shout out.
I mean, like we barely saw I don't think we saw Jay Ray. I don't think we really saw any of their players apart from like them getting like dunked on by Kansas in the Final Four, and like because or Michigan playing against them, like give them a little love.
Yeah. I was really bummed out by that. Like I said, the Big East did not get its due like the other conferences did, unfortunately.
I will say, apart from St. Peter's, I knew two things were going to be in the video. I was very like having my prediction skills here. Was like one was the cheerleader getting the basketball down from the top of the stanchion. I knew that was going to be in there, and like
Yeah.
Juwan Howard hugging the crying Tennessee player. When I saw that happen, I'm like, that's going to be in the March Madness video at some point.
Yeah, and was it Matherin who had that dunk? I don't think that was in it against TCU when he posterized the guy. That was one that I was for sure was going to be in there, and I don't know if it was. There was a couple of like, yeah, I don't think it made the cut. Yeah, that was one thing that I was surprised didn't make the cut. But yeah, the cheerleader, you knew the second that happened, you were like, all right, this is going to be on one shining moment for sure, and the Juwan Howard thing as well. Two things that you were like. Yeah, like once you saw them live, you were like, "This is going to be a highlight of the tournament."
Yeah, I saw that happen, and I think in terms of like they did not put the Matherin dunk in. I think they put the dunk from Auburn in. I think that was
Uh-huh.
they had Matherin hitting the three against TCU like in
Mhm.
overtime.
Yeah, the Auburn dunk was another one that I noticed as well. Yeah, some ones that I thought were shoo-ins for one shining moment didn't make it. But yeah, the cheerleader thing is hilarious. I mean, you knew that was that was gonna be featured. That's like again, that's like what the tournament is, like weird, funny things like that happening. There's nothing better than it.
Yeah, and I feel bad for all the other underdogs who usually get the spotlight for like pulling the upsets. Like St. Pierre stole all their thunder.
Yeah. Yeah. There was no upset talk outside of St. Peter's. And I mean, rightfully so. They made history, of course, but yeah, they certainly took up a big chunk of this year's one shining moment.
Yeah, let's take a little look ahead also to next season here in terms of like some teams to watch early on. In terms of like, I know a lot of the way too early top 25s are out today, the way too early
Mhm.
top 10s. Like, who are a couple of teams you have your eye on here? I know we are 7 months away from a ball being tipped again. We have a whole transfer portal to go through, a whole NBA draft cycle. But in terms of like teams you can see right now and say, this team could get to Houston next year, who's some teams you're looking at?
Yeah, well, you talk about these way too early top 25s. I think Brazello on ESPN did one. He had Arkansas, I believe, as number one in his way too early top 25. And you look at that recruiting class that they brought in. I think they had 3 5 stars and 3 4 stars coming in. Just an absolutely loaded recruiting class. I think second in the country behind Duke. For the Razorbacks, Musselman has done great on the transfer portal as well. So we'll see who he brings back. I'm not sure, what their lineup is going to return in terms of guys from last year. Of course, that remains, to be seen. But Arkansas is a team that's been knocking on the door. They've been right there the last 2 years, 2 Elite 8 appearances. I think the next year is a reasonable expectation for them to make the Final Four. When you look at this loaded recruiting class coming in, of course, you never know how freshmen are going to react to the college game. But when you have 5 star top 10 nationally recruits, you can kind of assume that they're going to be able to adapt pretty well. And by the end of the season, they're going to be playing pretty well. Of course, sometimes it doesn't work out. Look at Michigan. They were, looked at as a team that was a top 5 team at this time last year. And they kind of, they they were a Sweet 16 team, but they were kind of on the bubble most of the season. So, sometimes it doesn't work out, but I would say right now, Arkansas for sure. And one team that this season was really, all freshmen, overachieved for sure. Made the NCAA tournament was Creighton. Creighton was a team that brought in so many freshmen, had a big class coming in, made the Sweet 16 last season. This season they make an NCAA tournament appearance. They probably gave Kansas one of its toughest games of the tournament outside of the final. Creighton was right there with Kansas for a long way through. They had a couple of injuries. Kalkbrenner and Nemhard both got hurt. Both of those guys should be back. McDermott is a heck of a coach. I'm a Big East guy, so I had to give a shout out to Creighton there. I think that we could see Creighton as preseason number one in the Big East next season, ahead of Villanova, with all that Villanova is going to use. Of course, Villanova is a top 15 team going into next season, but Creighton could be top 10 here, and they're going to go in with real expectations. So I'm really looking forward to see how they play next season.
Yeah, a couple others to throw out here is Houston, obviously, because they're going to get back both Trayvon Mark and Marcus Sasser. That team got to the elite eight. So they're going to bring back a lot of that team. They're going to be active in the portal. They have a top 10 recruit coming in, Jarius Walker. So I would not be shocked if they are playing in Houston for the Final Four, which would be a lot of fun. UCLA, I think, getting the year separated from the high state. People not going to be as high on them as they were in this year. I don't think they did enough to see Johnny Juzang or Jaquez or Peyton Watson go pro. I think you have a chance to be stacked up there. And I think, again, in terms of like teams you could watch here, I think Duke, I'll mention them here, and talk about Kentucky here. Cause like right now, I mean, everybody assumes sort of that Oscar Tshiebwe is going to go pro to win the Player of the Year awards. But if he comes back and you have a recruiting class coming in, I feel like it's more balanced blend between Calipari's done in the past of bringing all the 5-star one and done kids. And last year when transfer heavy, I think you get a better balance here of those things. I think Kentucky can be very dangerous.
Yeah, and with Tshiebwe, it doesn't sound like it's a done deal that he's going pro. And yeah, if he's able to come back for them, that's probably the preseason number one, I would say, or up there for sure. And those blue blood type programs, they don't usually have two bad seasons in a row. It's very rare to see that. Obviously, the season wasn't bad for Kentucky, but losing so early in the tournament this season, you definitely think that they're going to be kind of extra motivated for next season to get back to deep in the NCAA tournament and deep into the Final Four. So it'll be very, very interesting to see that for them. And then, with UCLA, like you mentioned, a team that really, should bring a lot of their core back. Juzang flirted with the draft last season, but wouldn't shock me to see him come back again. And, that's a team that should win the Pac-12. Arizona, you would assume, is going to take a step back from how they were this season. So I think UCLA goes into next season probably right now, at least as the favorites in the Pac-12. We'll see how, again, the draft and the portal shakes up, but could be high expectations for them again.
Yeah, I think, again, we'll say here, these are predictions on April 5th.
Yeah.
It could be very different on June 5th, let alone on November 5th.
It could be different on April 8th. We don't know, how the portal and how the draft is going to go. It's hard to predict this stuff so far out, but yeah, just giving a snapshot of how it could be 7 months from now.
Yeah, it is a snapshot here. And Troy, I figured your guys be pretty active in the portal this year.
Yeah, we'll see about it. St. John's, they got to bring in a couple of they definitely got to bring in a shooter. They're flirting with Andre Curbelo from Illinois, so we'll see if they're able to land him. They've been involved in a lot of guys, but yeah, they need certainly a shooter to just kind of space the floor, build the team around Posh Alexander. They lose Julian Champagny, they lose Aaron Wheeler, who are two big wings for them. So they need to bring in kind of, a slasher type shooter that can space the floor for Posh Alexander. It's going to be Posh's team next season. So, got to kind of build around him and his strengths. And, his strengths, like I said, are kind of spacing the floor out, giving him room to operate in the paint. So we'll see about that.
Absolutely. And Troy, thanks for all the time. I really appreciate it. Before I let you go, be follow social media, keep up with some of the stuff you're up to.
Definitely. Yeah. You can follow me on Twitter at Troy Mauriello, Mauriello is the last name. Yeah, I do the Seeing Red podcast, cover St. John's basketball. Just did a podcast with Zach Braziller of the New York Post. So definitely check that out. If you're a St. John's fan, if you're a Big East fan, anything like that, definitely check it out.